U.S. intelligence agency, mind control.
Oh, God.
We want to move now to another critically important issue, tragic issue, of course, what took place in Moscow, the mall shooting. I think we're now to maybe 143 people died, just terrible situation, but a lot swirling around this terrorist attack. And we are very honored to be joined, by our very own world famous Kay Pritzker. Well, Kay, we appreciate you coming through to help us sort through this. Obviously, there's so much swirling around what took place in Moscow. And of course, I think the big question that people are having is, who did it? Obviously, ISIS, or allegedly ISIS-K in Afghanistan, has claimed credit for it. The Russian government is saying that Ukraine is behind it. There's debate about maybe they were even working together on some people. So there's all this sort of swirling thing. I mean, I guess I just wonder, really, what do you think about this debate in and of itself around the whodunit, when we don't really know exactly what's going on yet?
Yeah, I mean, this whole debate is almost misframed, especially on the U.S.'s side, because they're saying ISIS was just the sole one involved, or the sole group involved. But regardless of who pulled the trigger, I mean, I think any discussion of this topic has to start with where ISIS actually comes from, and that's from the United States. ISIS
it doesn't.
After the U.S. invaded Iraq, destroyed its government, destabilized the country, and demobilized the Ba'athist government and the Iraqi army, which left a bunch of people out on the street with guns and no jobs.
Correct.
And of course, they went and formed groups like al-Qeada.
Jack, you need to come past this. You need to come past this. First of all,
Office apologia?
First of all, he's right, but he's also wrong. There was already an insurgency. They just dismissed the Ba'ath Party and demilitarized it to make it worse. And the Ba'ath Party specifically focused on in Baghdad and the northern region, with groups like the Martyrs Brigade, 1920 Martyrs Brigade, that had a lot of Baathists in there, and they eventually grew to be like the Nishabi Order, which is like the most joke of the worst group of the insurgency. They're the nationalist Baathist ones of the insurgency, and all the other insurgent groups shit on them.
Also, ISIS came from Jordan, did it not? Egypt.
Yes.
Jordan. Yeah.
Trained in Afghanistan.
Jordan or Egypt is one of the two.
Well, I mean, both actually. More than it does come from Iraq and the Americans. It comes from Egypt and Jordan more than that, for sure. Because you have the fundamentalism of the Muslim Brotherhood and Qutubism that lays the foundation roots, and then you have like Abdullah Azzam come and add the jihadism and the noble brigade against to defend your land and defend God. That comes all together, and it paramounts in this era.
Yeah.
Where ISIS-K comes from, the ISIS affiliate in Afghanistan that's accused of orchestrating this attack. I mean, they came out of the power vacuum that was created when the U.S. invaded Afghanistan. And,
oh my God, bro.
Governments.
No, what power vacuum? What power vacuum? What, seriously, can I just pull up a map of what Afghanistan looked like? There's a great picture. It's 4 maps. Let me find it.
All right.
In power and failed, and eventually handed the government over to the Taliban, which created an environment where these sort of Wahhabist Islamic fundamentalist groups could sort of thrive in.
Oh, boom, easy.
From that angle,
I literally typed in map of Afghan war. 5th result was the map that I wanted. Okay, it's not loading. There it goes. Okay, now check this out. So this will be a very, very brief history. I agree. Especially if we're talking about Idlib. So this is going to be a really quick recap. Okay, so this right here, this is mainly the Peshawar 7. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't have them all. Sayyaf, Abu Sayyaf, Rabbani. This is where Masood is in Rabbani's faction. Khalis is important as well. Obviously, Hizbi Islami. Basically, look at this is like it's like they're all like named the same, right? So Khalis, this is like right here, and then you have these groups here, right? Do you know who also exists in this group? In this region?
I can't see your mouse.
Oh, well, just look Jalalabad, see where it's yellow, right? And then Kabul, you have the orange, that's Hizbi Islami, Hekmatyar's faction, right? So do you know who also exists in that region right there?
Haqqani?
Exactly. So
Aha.
these parties are where ISIS strongholds are today. Right? The white is kind of
Interesting.
basically where Haqqani is in a way. Now,
Ah.
so this is 1992. This is the worst year of Afghanistan in
Yeah.
this entire history, probably, right?
Post-Soviet, right?
Yeah. But 1992, this is like Massoud and Hikmatyar are like destroying the capital city with their war
Mhm.
against each other.
Yeah.
So then it's like this is after the Taliban rise. They rise in the first year. They take all this territory. Basically, they take the entire South 1 year, and it's because one, for starters, there is not a lot of you know territory being gained in this region. It's pretty empty, right?
Mhm.
So, but the community supported them because they were kind of like a solution to the chaos that
Mm.
was going on because of how violent the 90s era was and how lawless it was and how dangerous it was. So when Omar takes 14 students on a motorbike, right? And I think they have like a few, like one or two AKs between them. They go
Mm.
to this warlord's house who had kidnapped two girls, did horrible things to them. They they ran over his lower extremities with a tank and then hung him from the tank's turret.
Mm.
And then they finally get to the capital and they take down the government and they cut his testicles off and drag him behind a car and then string him up on like air traffic control stuff, like an air traffic
Mm.
control tower, and they put cigarettes and money in their hands to symbolize their corruption and greed and what it's caused the country, right? So that's what happens. That's what's going on in the late 90s, right?
Mhm.
2001, this is like America's intervention, right?
Yeah.
The Northern Alliance is literally like non-existence at this point, right? But there still is no, to say that all of this was controlled by the Taliban, maybe not so much, but basically people were down to get behind the Taliban because of how shit everything was, right?
Mm.
They're like, whatever, as long as violence will stop. You'd see a lot of that going on. And then by the end of 2001, this is the power vacuum. Where's ISIS?
Mhm.
They see that this area, the yellow, tribes revolting against the Taliban. Right? So this is how the conflict that's always been ISIS being in this territory has always been an insurgent territory.
Mhm.
So the whole philosophy that ISIS is that much different than the Taliban is not really the case. There's still a lot of country history and a lot of regional and family and tribal history that gets intermingled in there. And you have to be like an anthropologist and expert to really trace like a lot of this shit. Oh, yeah. Ironically, they did end up doing the same thing as the warlords. But there's like, and also what's interesting is like the only footage we have of Omar, he holds up the cloak of Muhammad that's in Afghanistan. And that's like Pashtun kings have like held that up at like times. Like I think the last time was like to unite against the British or something. You
Yeah.
know, so him doing that is what I compare to like his Robespierre moment when Robespierre has the cult of the Supreme Being festival and he holds it on
Mhm.
Pentecost. They're
Yeah.
using like religious imagery to solidify their power on the nation, which is like they mask it in Islamism, but it's really nationalism and romantic nationalism at that. Anyway, now we're gonna pull up a map of ISIS, but back to this idiot.
A power vacuum would imply that there were multiple people actually contending for taking over the country.
Yeah, there was no
There was no
power in the
power
country.
vacuum. It
There
was
was
a
no
direct
power.
transfer.
There was no
Pretty
power.
much a direct transfer, yeah.
Like the war was going on and the war continued.
Mhm.
The thing that happened is that more resources got poured into the Northern Alliance, who were guess who backed the Northern Alliance?
Mm.
Name two countries.
Mm.
Go ahead. What two countries would it be shocking for the United States to get an alliance with and back the people they're backing?
Russia and Iran?
Correct. Right? So when Massoud gets assassinated by bin Laden the day before 9/11,
Mhm.
it's the Iranian intelligence who said this is clearly al-Qaeda, right?
Yeah.
And so the Iranian intelligence tells Putin to call the Americans, right? So like Iran and Russia literally said al-Qaeda just killed the leader of the Northern Alliance. They're going to do something big soon. We need to like work together, right?
Yeah.
It was like a call to come together. And this is the Bush era where it could have actually happened, right?
Bye.
This, and moreover, I mean, the U.S. really Wahhabism and Islamic fundamentalism is
Oh my
in of
God,
itself
shut up.
sort of a U.S. creation.
Oh,
I
he's
mean,
still here. I thought
No,
you were
it's
leaving,
not!
bro. I didn't hear.
Fucking, he's saying that Wahhabism was also created by the United States. So what he's
awesome.
gonna say is that it was created in response to like the U.S. planting the flag and on their fucking
Mhm.
embassy. They put a little flag plaque up, and that's it's gonna flag it to this imperialist oil conquest thing. Also,
it was
if we did it, we would know. So
Mhm. We have a really good episode about 9/11. You can go watch that. Considering that you didn't actually leave and you're still hanging around, go watch our 9/11 episode. You might actually learn something.
not only the U.S. that funded and armed the Taliban, that trained and supported Osama bin Laden when he was fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan, but they also forged this relationship with Saudi Arabia and was really behind Saudi Arabia's diplomatic pivot to exporting Wahhabist ideology. They went to Saudi Arabia and they said, your enemy it's not Israel, it's not the West, it's not imperialism. Your enemy is communism. Your enemy is,
yes,
sort of
this is true.
Soviet
This
Union.
is true. And this is the thing is this is where you're going to have these half truths put in. What we have to think about is like how awful this period was. For like God, I would hate to be an American. Like you think we're bad now. Imagine the Cold War, how frustrating that shit would be, right? So like you have to think about it like the guy who's responsible for it, Brzezinski, right?
Yeah.
Zygmunt Brzezinski. So like his idea, being a Polish Jew, right? Terrified of communism, but he saw the godlessness of communism above all else. So his idea is that if we're exporting Islam, then that's a better defense against communism than introducing a new idea called democracy and liberalism to the region. So this is the theory on why they got behind some of these things. That being said, the people that we're looking at this time, right? Like when we say that Abdullah Azzam has a controversial checkered history, it's like, is he a hero or a terrorist? It's a broad line, Just it's not like John Brown, who's definitely more in the hero category, But like the idea that Islamist terror would rise when the thing that was the issue at the time was Palestinian terrorism, and it was like the nationalist kind.
Yeah.
Hamas didn't exist at this time, like Hamas comes about after the Taliban. The Taliban are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood as well. And so is all the Peshawar 7. They're all Muslim Brotherhood. So like you'll hear a lot of this, a lot of people who are from like the Arabic regions, like Emiratis and Iranians, Russians, and different things like that. They'll say the narrative, and it's an Egyptian narrative, that the Arab Spring was just to get people who were Muslim Brotherhood in power.
That's funny.
Because they'll hijack the protest.
And they started flooding the world with
no, literally, like without Brzezinski, like there like might not be any of this, there's a lot of different key players in this. He's definitely one of them, but really it's Azzam above all else, who was a Palestinian, let's not forget. And he was displaced from Palestine. He was arrested. He was kept in prison in Palestine, and I think as well. Not in Palestine, in Jordan, because it was Transjordan at the time.
Textbooks, building Wahhabist schools in Pakistan, throughout the Islamic world, with a lot of the money that they got through this oil deal they struck with the U.S. So even from an ideological perspective, the spread of terrorism or
Saudi Arabia made money off their natural resources. No!
And
now,
then,
guess what? Now I'm going to be Christopher Hitchens and talk about how China buys their oil, and this is all China's fault. Like it's you're literally the equivalent of Christopher Hitchens here, buddy.
And what is ISIS doing in Tajikistan, where these
I
terrorists
know.
that carried out the attack were
I
based out
know.
of? I mean, the U.S. then launched wars
Hey,
in Libya, in
could it
Syria,
could it have
in
something
Yemen,
to
in
do with the
Somalia, and
Tajikistan government? Oh, we can't acknowledge that because they're Russian loyalists. That's right.
Because they were all Tajiks, weren't they? The ones that
Yeah.
Russians
So like
arrested? Yeah.
for a while, like international terror was largely like Tajik, Uzbek, right? Because those countries really, like I said, the big networks when the war starts, the war on terror, it's the Uzbek movement. At least this is Pakistan, Afghanistan, which is where the war starts. It doesn't start in Iraq. It's Uzbek movement, Haqqani network, and al-Qaeda, and then Taliban. But Taliban is like also the political faction, right? So they still have like you can still like do political stuff with the Taliban. You can't do it with al-Qaeda, the Haqqani network, or the Uzbek movement. Those are all terrorist movements. So is the Taliban, but it's different. It's like the Houthi, you know? There's interfactions of the Houthi.
created more power vacuums for ISIS to spread all around the world. Outside of just the Levant, they've now spread to West Africa. They've spread to the Arabian Peninsula. They've spread to South Asia. I've even heard there's ISIS in the Philippines. You know, so the United States and U.S. foreign policy is
time out.
The spread of ISIS.
This is your expert. Your expert is like, I've even heard they're in the Philippines. Yeah, bro. Abu Sayyaf is in the Philippines. It's one of the most famous ISIS groups.
Expert.
These terrorist groups, this ideology behind these terrorist groups. So to just say, oh,
what
well,
is it?
ISIS.
What is the ideology behind ISIS? Please tell me it's Wahhabism. I'd love that.
Anarcho-fascism.
That's closer.
I mean, who created ISIS?
Because you think about it, you know, the way they see it, right? Like wait.
Can you tap on your microphone? Okay.
I've probably just been like,
you're blowing it out. That's all.
Yeah, I'm yelling. That's why, because it's I don't have the gain up, and I'm yelling. Like I don't know what to say.
Wahhabism.
Yeah. What about it?
ISIS, Wahhabism. I said,
yeah, not everything is Wahhabism.
Yeah.
Right. So you could say like Salafist, Salafi, you know. You could say that would probably be, if you're going to do as broadline as possible, that might be the way to go. Or just call them ISIS and not be like, this is their ideology and how it's funded in this Muslim school of thought. Oh, what I was going to say is their belief system is like, that's not necessarily about a government existing. It's about just it's like the church replaces the state, so it's not technically a state at the same time, even though they call themselves the Islamic State.
All these contradictions and all this tension surrounding Russia right now, you know, that was obviously very likely linked to this attack.
Well, I'm a little bit confused about this particular branch of ISIS in the sense that, like,
I'm always confused.
Happens to be an adversary or a country. I mean, it is weird, right? Like, it's just super weird. So this particular branch of ISIS like hates Iran. It does attacks in Afghanistan.
You fucking moron! One of ISIS' core tenets is anti-Iran. They wanted, bro. Well, like when Zarqawi meets Bin Laden, he's like, "Listen, you don't know shit, Bin Laden. You don't know shit about the Quran. We have to kill all the Shia." And Bin Laden was like, "Here's $100. Don't fucking talk to me again." That's literally how it went down. They immediately identified this genocidal intent against Shia from Zarqawi and tried to push him out of the movement. And the guy was so fucking good at running criminal shit that he was still able to take over al-Qaeda in Iraq when they did everything they could to stop it.
It's Russia. And my question is this like an ally of...
Did we not explain this? You explained this, right? All the international terrorism.
Yeah. So this is true too. Easiest to hire. These guys were paid. They were hired 100%. And that is something that like this person does have a good point. Like this does happen. So like when Trump and the Taliban teamed up together to like drop big bombs on ISIS, right?
Mhm.
And they got so destroyed. But they're still an internationalist group, so they have resources from other places. So they would pay the TTP to do their attacks and swear fealty to ISIS before those attacks, and use ISIS regalia and flags and stuff. So yes, 100%. That doesn't mean that these guys aren't jihadists in the first place, though, and just the ability for ISIS to activate things like this in other countries is a small part of what ISIS is. To be the group to influence foreign attacks on soil is definitely what we fear the most, being in the West and things like that, because it's scary, right? To be having a nice dinner and somebody starts opening up fire. It happens regardless of if it's ISIS or not here. So I definitely think this is a total factor. These guys probably were paid. Some of them may not even been that practicing. The gear that they had didn't exactly look great. The rifle that they had didn't exactly look great.
It was sparking, and I'm pretty sure it had a gas explosion.
Yeah, and like they
gas
didn't like
tube blew up.
and like you have a group of guys, like it looked like only like one or two of them were armed. Like the rest, they literally couldn't afford guns to go around with each other, right? But like there's also the guy who hit the bridge in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
So he was an Azerbaijan immigrant. You think he wasn't paid by whatever, intelligence force help that attack plan? So for sure. These people do get hired out. There is a contract system that goes on. There was ISIS fighters who were involved in October 7th even, because they were bought out on contracts to do these attacks. It's just like how we have a private military contract network in the West, and Russia has one. There's one for both ISIS and al-Qaeda, and they interact with each other. There's free agents up for the market on like many of these groups.
Free agent terrorists.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where else your mind's supposed to go from that. But also, I mean, more importantly, the Russians themselves, like the Russian government, is claiming some sort of Ukrainian
The rare
involvement.
good Twitch comment.
So what are your thoughts on that, Kay? Is it plausible there was some Ukrainian involvement? I think at some point some Ukrainian
you know how I always say like all these
tried to
ISIS
suggest that
groups, they're like traceable way earlier, right? I'm not going to get that much into it, but Abu Sayyaf, right? Which means like someone's sword. It's not necessarily named after Abu Sayyaf from Afghanistan. Father of swordsmith, so father of the sword is right. So this group that is Abu Sayyaf, which is ISIS in East Asia, they were founded in 1989.
Awesome. I've heard there's a group. Amazing. Expert.
No, this was some Russian false flag, try to make Ukraine look bad. And I'm like, all right, now everyone's just accusing everyone of stuff. So
Bro,
yeah,
some of them
all this to me because I don't understand.
Are aligned with the triads.
Yeah, I mean, I think to start off, the fact that the U.S. came out and said like a few hours after the attack that ISIS is the sole responsible party, that there's no signs of Ukrainian involvement.
Guess who else said that?
Everybody?
ISIS. Do their official established media channels.
This is before they gave their confessions.
Whose official flag has English
the
on
US
it?
somehow already knew that Ukraine wasn't involved, and it's like, how did they know that? It's almost like they just threw out their narrative on this, and they said, okay, we'll make
kind of like you guys threw out the Hirsch narrative on the pipeline.
Is it so preposterous?
Yeah,
I mean, this is what the US keeps saying, that it's ridiculous for Russia to suggest that there's Ukrainian involvement, and I mean, it's preposterous to say that Ukraine might have had a hand in this. I mean, Ukraine has been at war with Russia.
They're
for the last
literally
2 years.
in. There's Abu Sayyaf. I haven't looked at their flag. I thought it was just an ISIS flag. They must have an older one. Like the fact that technically they're not Ukraine. They are like, I forgot what they call themselves, but it's like they're technically like the exile government forces of Chechnya. So those guys actively are doing an insurgency in Russia. Why aren't we talking about that? guys? What about that? What about that insurgency you got in there? Yeah, I think let me see their I have to go back to their wiki because the flag we might be oh my god, give me the fucking I can't find the thing that I just had up about ISIS in the Philippines. Hit play.
Okay.
Of course, they have, it's not like they don't have some incentive to see an attack like this happen. But, I think also when you look at the rhetoric that's been
this
coming
logo
from Ukrainian
that's
leaders,
at the top, that's like a media thing that they do. So they'll put it in whatever languages is at the bottom. So, but yeah, we have to do an updated terrorist tier list. By the way, I have to get that organized. I'm just too addicted to Helldivers.
I'm gonna send you the next video. Can you take that over because I need to go to the toilet.
Not just the Ukrainian leadership, but also U.S. leadership calling Russia, a terrorist state, saying they're monsters, they're barbarians, they have to be stopped at all costs. When you hear things like this coming out of the leadership of not just your own country, but of this military super.
I'm pretty sure there's always going to be insurgency inside the Caucasus. They attack troops because fuck the Russian troops. That's why.
If
you got genocided twice by Russia, you'd be
that's the thing.
Well.
The insurgency going on is in Belgrade, though. They might be from the Caucasus, but they're in Belgrade.
Like that's where it's happening, but I'm saying like inside the Caucasus, I bet you there's fucking insurgencies there all the time.
Well, like a lot of them, like they are connected with ISIS and al-Qaeda. They go to fight for these groups. They get the training from these groups, right? And now some of these guys have been fighting the entire war on terror. They've been fighting against Russia, America, whatever. And now they're in Belgrade. They think about cutting your teeth by doing insurgency against the Americans, and think about how easy it would be to operate inside a fucking Russian city.
Question: were these all controlled and operated and a hub for Russian forces inside?
No,
Chechnya?
Chechnya did attack a lot of civilians, though. Yes.
No, but like were they like civilian? Like, you know what I mean?
I mean, it depends on who you believe about those apartment bombings.
Okay. Whether they were the Russians or
the Chechens. I'm not doing any apologia for anything.
I don't know enough about it. That's why I'm just asking questions.
I just think that it's al-Qaeda sort of derailed the fight against Russia by putting in this anti-American bullshit.
Yeah.
When Russia was clearly their enemy.
Yeah, long before America.
Well, the monarchy was their first enemy.
Is it so preposterous to believe that Ukrainians or someone that sympathized with Ukraine might have heard this and taken this literally? I mean, if you're talking about a terrorist state, I mean, why would you could see how someone might feel like, oh, I need to take this into my own hands. But moreover, on the socialist program, Brian raised a very interesting quote from Mark Milley, who's one of the top generals in the U.S. military, and he said about 3 months ago, addressing Ukrainian forces, I have the quote here. He said, "There should be no Russian who goes to sleep without wondering if they're going to get their
Russian
in the middle of the night. You got to get back there and create a campaign behind enemy lines." So right there, you basically have marching orders, like straight up marching orders, calling for a military campaign behind Russia's lines, so within Russia, to slit their throats, to make Russians fear to go to sleep every night, fearing that their throats will be slit.
Yeah.
How are we?
Is that Ukraine saying that? Because that's kind of based. Inciting insurgency inside Russia, so you don't have to fight anything. That's great. What a great tactic.
Actually supposed to believe that it's preposterous that Ukraine had no hand in this, when you literally have Ukrainian military and also U.S. military officials literally calling for a covert campaign behind behind Russian lines. But I think what takes the cake, I think the most damning piece of all of this is that Ukraine has been involved in attacks like this before. They were involved in the Samara railway bombing, which happened inside Russia. It was a railway that was transporting ammunition to the Russian front lines.
Legitimate
Sounds like a
target.
valid military target.
Bombed, and a few hours after the attack, Ukraine posts photos bragging about how it's paralyzed Russia's supply lines, how it's
Okay,
Sounds like a valid military target.
I actually don't have it,
Has
but
all
there's
this ammo.
days before the attack, right? Days before the attack happened, the Chechen unit was literally telling all Muslims in Russia to rise up against them, against Russia, and to do attacks.
it.
Like the Chechen unit that I'm talking about in Belgrade has called for these attacks.
Mm.
They're not ISIS though. They try
No.
the Russian narrative tries to frame them as ISIS, but they're not. It's just stupid. But that's the thing. If these guys were smart, they would run with that shit.
Assassination.
Yes.
But they
now
can't
it's
because then they would admit that there's fucking insurgents that are able to hit Russia every day
Yeah.
from inside their lines.
But this is very funny because they're complaining about military targets, like obvious military hits, and comparing it to a terrorist attack, and being like, obviously it's Ukraine.
Which, you know, Darya Dugin was the daughter of a very sort of
that was
Russian political philosopher. She
I
was
don't care who it
assassinated
was.
in Russia, and you know there aren't many Russian people who would have wanted this to happen or who would have sort of carried this out. But there were a lot of Ukrainians that celebrated it, and were happy about the fact that she was killed. And then you have the Crimean bridge bombing, which Ukraine openly claimed responsibility for. They claimed responsibility for.
Yes, they did. They did, and it was 100%
So,
a terrorist
the fact
attack.
that
Okay, 100% a terrorist attack. The guy still died for a good thing, though. Like as far as the fucking car bombs I've seen, okay, a lot of them have been used to do a lot worse and start things a lot worse.
That's true. I mean,
So
World War One was started by
that
an
was
explosion.
They were throwing the bomb at the car, but no, I mean like the bombings that kick off the civil war in Iraq. They bomb a mosque, right? They bomb the UN. So these types of the fact that it was like just an infrastructure target like that.
Yeah.
We're being told that.
I would say that that's a valid military target. It isolates Crimea from Russia. It's a valid military target.
Yeah.
And again, it's not like this, and saying that it's like this ISIS shooting is disingenuous. And to claim that it's anything alike when what reason would Ukraine have to go and massacre 140 Russian civilians?
And it's more like, as we've been saying in Chechnya, there's a lot of incidents, right? There's the theater crisis where they fucking pump fentanyl in there to gas them.
Yeah.
That's then done in Tenet or wherever they remake it in that Christopher Nolan movie. Then there's the whole there's the meme that the Alpha group just goes in and kills all the hostages, right? So it's like a Fuse in Rainbow Six Siege. I guess he team kills a lot.
Yeah.
So Fuse is always those guys being like, "Get back in there! Those are rookie numbers," because they held hostages. Like this infamous school hostage shooting, and they just fucking annihilated the building from all sides with armaments.
Yeah.
So there's definitely been shit like that's happened before. The issue is that Russia really can't frame ISIS as a real threat in their country. They can't afford to. They need to stay too focused on the war in Ukraine and acknowledging that ISIS did this is actually bad politically for them internally. Whether or not they use it for actual escalation or they're just talking out their ass, who knows with that fucking guy.
Yeah.
Most of the things he says is coming out his ass.
Yeah. Wouldn't be so sure. I wouldn't be so sure about that. Russia and the USSR has a long history with Islam, and it's not good.
Yeah, I would say today it's more likely for a Tajik to be behind an ISIS attack than a Chechen, mainly because mainly because a lot of Chechens hate ISIS because they detracted from their goal of refounding their capital and taking.
Yeah, but I'm saying I wouldn't be so sure that Chechens wouldn't as a nationalist terrorist.
Well, the thing is that they're all in Syria now. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Right. So anyone who's still in Chechnya is like a loyalist to the Kardavites, and that's where you'd see the attack is probably against Kardavites.
Mm. Okay,
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So like any of the more militant guys, like when Omar al-Shashani, I think Jolani himself may have said this, or
Mm.
his number two, who is like Muslim Shashani or something. But they were like, he's not even a real Chechen, right? Because he
Mm.
wasn't. He was like half Chechen, and he's like Georgian, right? He was born in Georgia. Like you can see it, you can go interview his dad. And he's like, I don't know what happened to my son and why he became the military commander for ISIS. But they hated him because they're like, he's not a real Chechen. He's corrupted our movement. He's
Mm.
like, it really caused a major rift in actually like being united.
Yeah.
And started breaking down all the groups there to their most basic forms.
Mm-hmm.
That it's preposterous that we're supposed to feel crazy to even think that there might have been involvement from Ukraine, which is carried out terrorist
I
attacks
think the
like
West did this
inside
by
Russia
use
before,
of proxies.
is,
Wrong. No, they didn't. There's no reason to.
The only evidence that I've seen of proxies is that one Seymour Hersh article that every propaganda agent talks about because that's all
Well,
they've got, and Jackson Hinkle pulling out a picture of a boot that says, "Oh my God, look, a boot that's been used by every diver ever for 20 years."
oh, are we talking about the fucking Nord
Nord
Stream?
Yeah, that's what they're
Oh,
talking
okay,
about.
that's different. Okay, I think it's if you want to believe the West did that, that's a much different story. I think there's no evidence whatsoever, so that's more of a believe whoever you want type thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I thought we were talking about the West doing the ISIS attack with proxies.
No.
Yeah, because that would be wild.
No, because I've been watching the Twitch chat's been interesting.
Ridiculous. And I think the U.S. government, the State Department wants us to feel crazy. They want people who are skeptical to feel crazy. They want Russia's narrative to sound
I don't
crazy.
know
But
about
really,
that.
I think calling it preposterous to say that there's no chance that Ukraine had any involvement before the facts of the matter have even come out. I think that's really
United States ain't funding shit right now.
No, good points and really important context. I think obviously with all these different things swirling around, it's important to remember some of these deeply contextual points as we move.
It was NAFO.
Look, man, no. Russia is funding the war. The West is funding Ukraine's defense. It's
Russia
a very
can
different
leave.
thing.
Russia can
So
leave.
Russia can end this war at any point by leaving. That's the difference. So it's also an imperialist war of conquest. Did you support the Iraq war? Did you support America invading Iraq? If you supported America invading Iraq, then sure, support Russia invading Ukraine. But if you supported the Iraqis, why are you not supporting the Ukrainians?
Even then, that was just like a coup at the end of the day that destabilized something. Like
Sure, but my
it's
point
not like
remains the same.
land
It was a full scale
expansion. It's
invasion.
like Russia's even more pathetic because it's like
Yes.
a land expansion.
Yeah. So it's like, but my comparison is on the full scale
Yeah,
invasion.
I know.
Not so much the reasoning behind it. So,
I'm just
and
saying.
the other thing is like, do you support Israel or Palestine? If you support Russia, the Iraqis and Israel, why? If you support Ukraine, the Americans and Palestine, why? These are inconsistent positions to hold. These are morally contradicting positions to hold. These are positions to hold without principle. Like it's just siding with whatever side you think is right at this point, not siding with factual information, the people against the state, against the people
It's also
perpetrating the violence.
ultimately any of these narratives you have to put loyalty into a state to begin with to even get to these
Yes.
narratives because
Yes.
like I say, everyone is anti-war.
Yeah.
Like
It's just like, I don't know. It's and to say it's funding is also disingenuous because it's like they're loans, but also it's mostly just equipment, and it's equipment that America was just going to get rid of anyway. So why not make some money from it? They're already replenishing all their stocks. They're replacing all their ammunition. They're replacing They're replacing their artilleries. They're replacing all their service rifles, their machine guns, their man pads. All of this shit is being replaced. Why not send it to Ukraine? You know,
Yeah, like when they
countries
sent
all around the
when
world
they
have decaying planes.
like when
just
they
sitting
when
in
they
their Air
when they
Force
were
base.
replacing weapons and sent the old ones to Saddam.
Same
Same thing.
like,
I'm
yeah.
just fucking around.
So it's, I don't know. It's like, but at the end of the day, every single thing from
Yes, they can.
2014.
Yes, they can. If you
Yes,
believe
they
that
can.
Russia cannot just leave Ukraine, you're wrong. It's as simple as that.
They literally
That's
can
not
just
how it
leave.
works.
So
But then a power
they can
vacuum
just
will
stop.
form and another ISIS will come.
But it's like, also the other thing that people always bring up, what's the Minsk agreement, right? The Minsk
Oh my God.
agreement. Fuck the Minsk
I
agreement.
don't think
like,
any of the Ukrainians are here right now to like lose their shit. You even bring
no,
it
like
up.
who gives a shit? Like, who gives a shit about the Minsk agreement?
I
If
give
you
a
really
shit
want
about
something
Johnny
to not give a
Jizzo.
shit about, like if you really want an agreement that nobody really gives a fuck about, that's really something that you should look at, it's the Budapest Memorandum, which gave Russia back their nukes and promised them sovereignty, which Russia is now breaching by sending Nazis into Ukraine in 2014. That's how they're breaching it. Everything is Russia's fault in the Ukraine conflict. Everything. And it doesn't matter. Even if America did back the coup, back the Orange Revolution or back Euromaidan, which they didn't, even then, wouldn't matter. Literally wouldn't matter. None of the arguments that can side with Russia I've heard matter. Because it's all arguing from emotion. It's all they said, he said, they said, Telegram said, War Clandestine said, Biolabs, all of this shit. All of it. Every single one has a tiny, tiny, tiny anchor to reality, and then they just run with the narrative and create this horseshit information warfare narratives that we've had to track and deal with for 2.5 years. So I guarantee nothing that you say will surprise me or be new to me at all. I have heard it all. Anyway, you can play the next video now.
Okay. I decided that one that was on there was basically boring. It was just an hour-long Eugene interview. So, I picked something else that's fun.
Okay, that's fine. I'll mark it.
I need to close some tabs. I need to return some videotapes.
Are you aware of a CIA psychological profile about you, sir? Would you be interested in hearing what the CIA had to say? This secret study portrays as a brilliant but dangerous megalomaniac who is likely to pursue his own aims in disregard of U.S. interests. He's an uncertain ally. Shall I go on, or would you prefer that I stop, sir?